So now we're going to address how to do supercurricular reading, how to approach supercurricular reading, the process that you can choose to engage in or go through in order to obtain optimal performance. So let's ask Peter, how should an aspirational Oxbridge student approach supercurricular reading?
Well, be prepared to put long hours in the trenches. And by the trenches, I really mean second-hand bookshops. You don't have to read the books among the stacks. There is a bookshop in Paris that you're allowed to stay overnight on a portable bed, but it's not compulsory. Go collect the books, take them home, and then plan your way through them. You're already adept at building revision timetables. You've been using those elegantly in year 10, 11, and 12. Now you need revision timetable plus, and the plus is, where do I allocate and insert my supercurricular reading for optimal benefit? Now you need the mentor. Highly unlikely, without an advisor, that you will opt for even a good trajectory of supercurricular study, and certainly not an optimal trajectory. You need somebody who has eagle's eye view of a vast swathe of supercurricular reading material, so that that person can give you advice about how to build a bridge from the content of your PS to the more difficult terrain at interview, where you'll impress them with your academic potential and you'll carry off the Oxbridge offer that you want. The key here, start early, move quickly, don't be despondent, keep digging, keep rising.
So you often give an example of 3 nested coffee tables. So I don't know if you can share that with students looking to understand how to approach supercurricular reading.
Yeah, the final deployment of material from the 3 coffee tables will occur at the interview. But let me explain. The largest coffee table at the top of the nest, that's the most visible to you as you finish year 12. It's the specification work, it's the PowerPoints you've been given in class, it's the textbooks. Underneath that, I'm arguing that you need a beautifully decorated second coffee table covered in surprising supercurricular books. And that table will get decorated in the summer holiday as you go from book to book. The smallest of the 3 tables, and the least obviously visible one, is the placement table, which is the smallest of the 3 in the nest. Sadly, a lot of students miss the opportunity to answer questions from the placement table. They are so blinded by the vast quantities of material on tables 1 and 2 that they miss the opportunity to impress by using placement material. It's also worth saying that some students have external activities such as amateur dramatics or debating skills or poetry, out readings. Those are also very good places to pull information from in order to give an impressive answer. The material is likely to be bespoke, it's likely to be specific to you, unique, and therefore it's likely to showcase your academic potential much more effectively than anything from the spec.
So in helping students to understand how to approach this, one of the edges is to start early. And what does starting early look like, and what might that revision timetable look like as a student works out how they can be optimal with their supercurricular reading?
Well, the key skill of starting early helps with everything. It helps with aptitude test preparation. Let's not forget, before the interview, Cambridge and Oxford have placed the aptitude test. Only by doing well in the aptitude test are you likely to be invited to interview. These aptitude tests take quite a long time to get better at, quite a long time to improve at. Similarly, the material that you're going to end up using once you get to interview, you need that material to be showcasing your skills. And again, to acquire sufficient material and sufficient islands of knowledge to be impressive, you're going to need a long reading trajectory. So start early is key. In fact, we've focused on summer holiday, but there is the Easter holiday and there is the Christmas holiday. In an ideal world, someone on our 12-month program would be guided at the very beginning of the 12 months to choose a trajectory, even before they put pen to paper for their first PS. So now you've got the optimal trajectory of reading, PS, more reading at Easter, refinement of PS, more reading in the summer, preparation for aptitude test, preparation for interview, and then winning the offer. So it's very much a synergistic process where momentum builds over time.
So the students got momentum. We're going to encourage, I would suggest, consistency. And then specifically, let's take the summer holidays. How many hours, if we just break it down further, would you suggest it takes? And have you got a student example who built a timetable and approached it in this way?
Yeah, I'd say 30 to 40 hours a week for supercurricular reading. Now, the example I had in mind wasn't about her entire program. It was her preparation for one particular topic. And we chose to work on the Rosetta Stone. And I gave her a book by Christian Jack. He's a novelist, but he's also written, he's a professor of Egyptology. And the beautiful book he wrote was Champollion on his deathbed, recounting to his 8-year-old daughter his life of exploration in Egypt. He tells the story of finding the Rosetta Stone. And that was the first thing I gave to my student. So she opened into the Rosetta Stone at an emotional level. We didn't forget Einstein's famous quote. Einstein said the mind has two components. There is the intellect, which is the servant, and there is the imagination, which is the master. And the problem with our education system, according to Einstein, is we worship the servant and we ignore the master. So by starting with this beautiful book by Champollion, she became emotionally invested in the quest to crack the Rosetta Stone. Then we pivoted in the direction of cryptography, and we looked at a book called Code Breakers, and we looked at how people have worked on scripts, hieroglyphics, Linear B, and she became more invested in the analytics. Then we pivoted to the history again, and we looked at the military expedition, Napoleon's army, finding the Rosetta Stone. And then we pivoted to the rivalry between Champollion himself and Thomas Young. Thomas Young, the English polymath, who had done some work and wanted to claim priority. In reality, it's true that Young's work was used by Champollion to elucidate more aspects of the Rosetta translation, but it's not true that the credit all belongs to Young. By week 5, my student was able to give brilliant presentations, 6, 7, 8 minutes long, on the Rosetta Stone from a multitude of perspectives. That carried her through to interview, and she was able to deploy it, show excellence and capacity, and she received her offer. She spent 5 to 6 hours a week on the Rosetta Stone for 6 weeks. So just one topic, 36 hours of endeavor to build an island of knowledge sufficiently deep to get her noticed and to win the offer. But 5 to 6 hours a week isn't going to be enough, because you need to be building EPQ level knowledge in 5 or 6 areas. So 35, 40 hours a week, that'll carry you through.
So people may be surprised when it comes to the approach and how to be successful with supercurricular reading, that they can actually leverage team environments, colleagues. What would you say about this?
It's essential because if you work in an atomistic way, as you've been trained to by your experience in secondary school, you will miss a lot of opportunity to improve quickly by listening to others. I'll give you an example. I had a group of students, a couple were applying for history, one was applying for PPE, another was applying for theology and philosophy. And so I wanted to work with them as a group in the summer holidays. And I took 2 books with very similar titles. I took Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy, and I took Professor Grayling's History of Philosophy. Now, these books are very different, although they cover the same terrain. Russell's book was written in 1945, and if you read his chapter on Nietzsche, he was feeling quite anti-Germanic. Some of his friends had died at the front, and so his essay on Nietzsche is not a model of objectivity. It's quite bitter. Then in 2017, when Grayling produced his History of Philosophy, It covers a wider geographical tranche than Russell's because it takes in the East as well. But he also has a chapter on Nietzsche. And his chapter is more, how can we say, journalistic. And it has interesting stories. And modern students tend to remember and prefer that essay. The workshop came into its own because we juxtaposed the two essays. And I set the two essays as pre-reading. And then in the workshop, I got the 5 students to discuss what they liked, what they disliked. Here's Russell's thesis. Here's Grayling's antithesis. Can we generate a synthesis? And the students found that experience, I think, very enriching. And the ones that were very serious, I set them additional reading for the following week that was more specific to their target subjects. And in that manner, we were able to give them something that would get them noticed and win them an offer. Oh, and just to say, there's no chance that year 12 students would randomly alight on those 2 essays and juxtapose and contrast them. That's where the mentor is required.
So when we think about how and this sense of preparation, talk to the students about starting early and therefore taking the stresses out of next term.
Well, one element you can build into your early timetable for study is looking ahead to year 13. Now, this mostly happens in the summer holiday. I do remember myself when I was doing A-level biology, being on the last day of year 12, I went to a bookshop in Crosby and I bought a guide to year 13 biology. And I sat on a bench and I started to read it. It took me a couple of weeks to finish it, but I was very pleased and grateful later in the autumn term that I'd already made so much headway with year 13 biology. In fact, for me, it was really important because I'd pivoted away from applying for medicine with my 3 science A-levels in order to apply for PPE. And so I wouldn't have had enough time to prepare for my PPE interview if I hadn't done any work on my A-level biology in the summer holiday before. So the benefits of starting early, working long and hard, they just continue to pour through the process.
So on behalf of the students, I would like to thank Peter for pointing out, highlighting a number of areas that are examples of how we can successfully navigate our supercurricular reading, starting early, utilizing things like summer holidays, making the necessary sacrifices, getting involved in the workflow, creating the revision timetable. In this way, taking the stresses out of future terms, actually becoming consistent in your endeavors, in your study with 5 to 6 hours a week, and then also creating leverage by working with teams of people, colleagues, meeting up, distributing the workload and sharing the fruits of your labor. So thanks to Peter, and we'll look forward to sharing the next part of this with you next.